the Fiio SP3, a masterclass in BS. The sound quality on these speakers is not good because of some really cool features, really nice build quality. The website is full of the most useless marketing drivel that I've seen. And honestly, if not for the website, I probably wouldn't do a review, like a video review. I probably would have just said, hey, I tested these out. Here's the data. I don't like them. And that would have been that. But I felt personally annoyed, aggravated, whatever, any other negative connotation that you want to strap to the feeling that I had when I saw their website. So I'm going to go through their website. I'm going to dissect some of these things because Fiio isn't the only manufacturer to do this kind of stuff. Unfortunately for them, they just struck a nerve with me today. And my job is to serve you all, the viewer. It's not to kiss manufacturers' butts to get them to send me more stuff. Let's hit some details first while I show you some video. Retail price is about $2.99 per pair for these. Features a 3.5-inch carbon fiber midwoofer and a 1-inch silk dome tweeter. Power is about 30 watts for the midwoofer and 10 watts for the tweeter, according to the manufacturer. The cabinet is actually pretty robust. And I'll do this. I mean, it's solid. The build quality, other than that, hold on. All right. The build quality on these things is, honestly, it's really impressive. But the look of it, this ribbed thing, it looks like it was 3D printed, and that's just junky looking to me. Maybe they were trying to go for a standout look. It stands out in a bad way, personally speaking. This little thing that just fell off is the bottom pad, and it actually comes with like a clear portion for the LEDs to show through, and you can see that in the video as well. But there's also a 7-degree riser that tilts the speaker up toward the listener's position. Now, the reason you would want to do that is if these are placed on a desk stand, and you would want to tilt them up a little bit more toward you. But even doing that doesn't help. The problem is that when listened to on axis, facing directly at you, which is the most ideal positioning for pretty much any speaker, with the exception of some, the treble is way too bright, the mid-range is way too scooped out, and the bass sucks. There's no bass on these guys. Now, I'd be okay if it just didn't extend down past maybe 70 hertz or something like that, but the problem is that it's a very high Q bass resonance to it. I'll show you what I'm talking about in the data, but in other words, the enclosure is way too small for this driver. At least the tuning between the driver and the enclosure is just incompatible, and it creates a very steep resonant peak on the bass, and it's just like a one-note wonder. That's pretty much it. Now, when it's positioned below you, one would think, all right, well, that would knock down that treble some, and maybe that's its design. It doesn't work like that, unfortunately, not with this particular speaker, because the crossover is still so bad that there is about 5 to 10 dB delta between the crossover region when this speaker is positioned lower, like at desk level. So anywhere from 10 to 30 degrees or 40 degrees, depending on how close you are. You know, like if you're sitting right here or if you're sitting back here, that angle changes, okay? Depending on that angle that you are to the tweeter, that dip at the crossover region is going to be pretty significant, and it's going to take out all the upper mid-range detail that you should have. And yeah, it'll knock down the high frequency some, but it still sounds bad. In other words, there's nothing I could do to make the speaker sound halfway decent. And at $300, come on, guys. No. So to hit a few of the highlights, the pros for me are it's relatively compact, build quality is solid. I do like the RGB lighting on the bottom. I mean, that's pretty cool. And there is actually good dynamic range on these speakers. That's the one thing on their website that I think they got right. As far as cons, I wish there was a volume knob on the front. It does look like it's 3D printed. It looks just kind of cheap. The sound quality, I've already talked about. No bueno. I'm not expecting world-class sound quality, but when you go to their website, that's why I'm making this video. So let's go to their website and start picking some of these things apart. Here's the first thing. I've highlighted in red this box right here. The SP3 employs a 3.5-inch carbon fiber midwoofer, larger than typical products in its class. Okay, what typical products in its class? PreSonus Eris 3.5. That's in its class. It's $99. I mean, this thing doesn't sound good either, but regardless, it's still in its class. How is it larger than typical products in its class? It's not. Okay. M Audio, another one in its class. This is just quick Amazon searches. So this stuff about bigger than typical products in its class, come on. The next part, these larger woofers have an inherent advantage over smaller woofers in dynamics, projecting a larger soundstage and other sonic attributes. Okay. It is true that the majority of the time, larger drivers have better dynamics than smaller drivers. Now, I've already addressed that there's plenty of other products out there on the market, and I just threw you two that have 3.5-inch midwoofers, okay? But my main point about this is projecting a larger soundstage. That's not how it works. Larger drivers do not have a larger soundstage inherently. It does not work like that. And you can go through all of my reviews, and you can see that it's the case that it doesn't work like that. And if you want to talk in generalities, in general, it is true, however, that larger drivers typically have smaller sound stages. Why? Because drivers beam. The larger a driver is, the lower in frequency it beams, the less soundstage radiation you're going to have, generally speaking. So if they want to talk about generalities, well, that's a false statement. The next thing, 1-inch silk tweeter. Ultra high frequencies remain uncompressed. Hey, that's true. The data actually does back that up. This speaker does a good job of compression. The result being better treble reproduction even in off-axis listening, as well as highly resolving treble with natural timbre. This speaker does not have natural timbre by a long shot. The highly resolving treble, guys, when you see resolving or detailed treble, expect high frequency boost. Almost all the time, that's what you get. And it's just marketing BS. It's that sound that you hear that you go, oh, wow, never heard that before. And then an hour or two later, you're thinking, oh my God, my ears are bleeding. This aggravates me. As you can tell, I'm passionate about this. Better treble reproduction because it has a 1-inch tweeter instead of a 3/4-inch tweeter. Nope, doesn't work like that either. Again, larger drivers radiate in a more narrow fashion as they go higher in frequency compared to smaller drivers. So actually, a 3/4-inch dome tweeter is going to have more broad radiation than a 1-inch dome tweeter. The SP3 features a large empty cavity rear of the tweeter magnet, allowing the tweeter to play frequencies as low as an astonishing 800 hertz. Yeah, but they tell you that they cross it over at 3.4. So if it will play lower, then why don't they do that? Because the data shows clearly that there's a hole in the crossover as you go above and below the tweeter line. If it plays lower, let it play lower. That way you don't have a hole in the response. That way, when you're sitting at ear level or you're sitting below or above ear level with that tweeter, it's going to sound pretty much the same if they use that lower crossover. But instead, they say it can get down to 800 hertz, but we're going to cross it at 3.4. All right, then. Thanks to the 1-inch tweeter unit, there is no drop in the 10 to 20 kilohertz frequency band. As opposed to what? As opposed to maybe a 3/4-inch tweeter like you said previously? Okay, well, how about some examples? 3/4-inch dome tweeter, 10 to 20 kilohertz. No drop. That's what, 1 decibel swing? No drop. $17 3/4-inch tweeter. No drop at all from 10 to 20 kilohertz. I just gave you 2 cheap examples of tweeters that don't have a drop from 10 to 20 kilohertz that aren't 1-inch. So this notion that a 1-inch tweeter is somehow better than other tweeters, smaller tweeters, assumedly, that's nonsense. But I'll do you one better. Let's look at their own website where they had their frequency response provided. If you look, they show the same high frequency rise I'm about to show you. Notice that their scale is 0 to 100. My scale is going to be about 50 to 100 or 40 to 90. Pay attention to the blue right here. Well, they're showing a little bit of a drop here and then a boost around 16 and then falling off. Same thing at 15 degrees off axis and then 30 degrees off axis. Now, the falling off axis is expected, but the way their website reads would have you believe that it's flat to 20 kilohertz and there's no real fall off at all. And finally, they talk about the S-shaped porting tube, bass robustness. Let's see, for reduced audible noise. Okay, I can tell you that when listening to these speakers, I can hear port chuffing. And it's not so much chuffing, it's just the ringing from the port. For a pure, robust bass quality, no, this speaker has anything but pure and robust bass. It's a one-note wonder. All in all, the SP3 will easily immerse you in a movie thanks to its ability to accurately reproduce sound effects. All right, so that's speaking to a home theater type person. Now, you and I, most of you who are watching this channel have been watching me for a while, you're probably well versed in what to expect from speakers of certain sizes. But those who may be new to this channel, and I welcome you if you are, or maybe you just don't know better because you're just new to speakers in general, you might read this part where they say in a movie and think, oh, it's going to have low bass. And you may not know the difference between 100 hertz and 50 hertz or 30 hertz. You may just know that the lower the number is, the more bass you get. And when they talk about a movie, you know that movies have lower bass, like 30 hertz or something like that. So my point being that you may see this line about the movie and you may think, oh, it's going to have low bass. It does not have low bass. And I really don't like how they use this line in their marketing. Very, very misleading. So I've talked about those things. I'm going to show you the data to back up exactly what I heard and to counter their claims and their marketing. Now, all of my measurements were done using the Klippel near-field scanner. As a state-of-the-art 6-figure device that allows you to get anechoic data of a speaker in a non-anechoic room, meaning that I can extract the speaker's response without having to worry about what is going on in the room. And that makes my data better for you, for me, and allows me to have something tangible to grab onto when I combat these claims from manufacturers. First of all, we're going to look at frequency response. Now, you would believe that this speaker does two things at least. Gets low and it has good sound quality, meaning that it has good reproducibility, good neutral timbre, which would be a flat on-axis response. By definition, signal in equals signal out. Now, whether or not you like that sound, it's not up for debate right now. We're talking about a speaker that claims to be neutral. If it's neutral, then it doesn't color the sound in any way. It reproduces the signal exactly as it's supposed to. And when I sweep it with a sine wave, it's supposed to reproduce that sine wave, meaning that it's supposed to have a flat line right through here in the on-axis response. Well, we can see that it certainly does not. High frequency is boosted, mid-range is significantly scooped. And then we've got the bass. This bass peaks at about, I'd say, what is that, 80, 70, about 70 hertz or so. And it just hits that note with authority. If you happen to have music or a movie that only hits 70 hertz and you don't care about anything else, because look at the rate of fall off here. At F3 of 59 hertz and F10 of 53 hertz. So it's 7 decibels down in 7 hertz. It's not good. It does not have pure, robust bass like they're telling you it does. This is the CEA 2034 data. And in general, what I'm looking for is how EQable is this speaker. And if you're using this on a desktop, you may have programs where you can equalize it, which means that you're going to want to scoop up this mid-range, bring it back up, kill this one-note wonder resonance right here. But then you're also going to want to try to fix some of this higher frequency stuff. And in this upper range, it looks like it could be reasonably well equalized, but I don't know how many of you are going to do that. Just keep that in mind. It can be equalized as long as this dashed blue line down here is somewhat linear. So as long as it's got somewhat of a linear response. So right through here, somewhat linear. Through here, it's somewhat linear, but right around 1 kilohertz, it cannot be equalized. And around 1.3 or so kilohertz, it cannot be equalized because these are just swings in the directivity. And I've got a whole series of videos on this. If you want, follow the card up here. Otherwise, we're going to keep it moving. Now, what I want to do is give you a comparison to another speaker that costs $180 from Monoprice that I reviewed about 2 or 3 years ago. Now, what I did with that speaker is I measured it with the port stuff. You may say, well, why didn't you do the same thing with this speaker? Well, it's $300 and I wouldn't tell you to stuff a port on a $300 speaker. I would say go buy this Monoprice for almost half the price and stuff the port. This is what you get with the Monoprice. It's still not great, but it's a whole heck of a lot better. You've still got that upper high frequency boost, but you don't have that dire, that terrible bass note, that one-note wonder bass. And in general, it's more equalizable. Look at the smoothness of the response down here. I'm going to switch over now to Room EQ Wizard, and I'm going to show you the actual measurements at my seated position for a couple different methods. The first one I'm going to show you is with the microphone or my ears in this situation. About here, about relative to right here, from the speaker. So the tweeter's down below me, and that's kind of what you can expect when you're sitting in a chair or standing up at a desk. That response is somewhat flat-ish. I mean, but the problem is, look, you got an average SPL of about 70 decibels at 1 kilohertz, and roughly give or take. And then at 2 kilohertz, 3 kilohertz area, you got 60. So you got about a 10 decibel droop in that crossover region. Remember I talked about how they said this speaker could cross over, or the tweeter could cross over down to 800 hertz, and saying, well, why didn't they do that? If they had done that, or even if they just crossed at 2 kilohertz instead of the 3.4, then this would have been filled in and it would have been a better response at the seated position. The mid-range droop does kind of fill in, but just barely from the desk bounce. And I mean, just barely. This right here is the room. It's the rear wall reflection. But now let's switch over and look at when I'm further back, but I put the speakers on axis with my ears. This is what you get. So at best, that crossover dip is about maybe 7 to 8 decibels instead of 10 decibels. It's still a problem. So what you wind up with is no mid-range detail, or no upper mid-range detail for sure. That just doesn't exist. Soundstage radiation and width. Okay, if I just assume that width overall is about the same, about plus or minus 70 degrees, but they said that the 1-inch tweeter will play out to 20 kilohertz without problem, and that's cool. But if they use a 3/4 dome tweeter, then they wouldn't beam so soon right through here. This would have extended out to about 13 kilohertz or so, and you wouldn't have such a narrowing at around 8 kilohertz. This is the vertical response. So on axis is this dark red ear right at the tweeter. But what I wanted to show you is if you go above the tweeter 10 degrees, 20, 30, or 40 degrees, this is the hole in the response. Now, this is why we saw my in-room measurements being what they were at that crossover, having that 10 decibel drop in some cases, because I'm going above the tweeter line. Distortion looks pretty good. 86 decibels. Hey, not bad. 96 decibels. Okay, more of a problem in the bass, but that's expected. That's not really a big deal with a smaller speaker like this. So I would say actually the distortion looks pretty good. Multi-tone distortion, again, all things considered, I think it looks pretty good. Compression. Now here's the area where this speaker does better than I expected it to do as well, and that's in compression. See, I mean, the limiter kicks in below about 100 hertz at the higher SPLs. Not an issue for me to see these kind of things going on for the size of the speaker that we have here, at least in my opinion. And then the high frequency, they talked about how there was good dynamic range of the high frequency. I think they said low compression, something along those lines. Yeah, dude, they're right. I mean, it looks pretty good. Again, I'm impressed with the higher frequencies to not have that compression that I would have expected it to have at the higher outputs. So that does it for this review. I appreciate you watching, and I hope that you learned something. If you plan on buying these speakers, even though I would recommend against doing it, please consider using my affiliate link in the comment description section below. That helps me with a small commission at zero additional cost to you. But like I said, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. I would look at maybe the Monoprice MM3 that I talked about earlier as a better alternative. If you appreciate these kind of reviews and you would like to support the channel in any way, please join me at patreon.com/Erin's Audio Corner. And there you can interact with me. I share some behind the scenes information and some updates, but mainly it's a way for you to help support me and allow me to keep this channel going. These speakers were actually sent into me from a viewer along with the PreSonus that I'll be reviewing soon as well. So I want to thank him for sending those to me. He knows who he is. I'll talk to you all later. Take care. Peace.